Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dilan. This week, we're going to talk about another issue which is like last time, which is that if you are not important, not rich, and even worse, when you're poor, things don't seem to work for you. Last time I spoke about people. This time I'm talking about entrepreneurs and small companies, or what we call micro, small, and medium enterprises. Now, here's the funny thing. Almost every government for the last 20 years pays lip service to how important these companies are. They're called MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises. They are the backbone of the country. They contribute 30% to India's GDP. They employ 12 crore people, and yet they suffer. It never makes headlines because they're not big enough. If it's a listed company, it makes it to the mainstream media. But if it's small companies, you don't hear a word about what happens. The government, of course, says they recognize their importance. They talk about it. They even set up a separate ministry for MSMEs in 2007, which shows their seriousness about this sector and helping them. And believe me, the world, it gives special treatment to small entrepreneurs because they create employment. They are the ones who employ people formally, informally, and account for more employment than the large companies. Now, when the NDA government came to power 10 years ago, it went a step further. It introduced a series of initiatives, including better credit support, digital adoption, technology upgrades, credit guarantees, skill development, and all kinds of loan facilities that are supposed to be available. So far, so good, right? What happens afterwards? So when an entrepreneur sets up a company, they usually struggle to get formal credit. So they're invariably asked to hypothecate their homes and whatever property they have because bank credit depends on that. Government framework makes them comfortable about it because it seems like the government is there to handhold them. For instance, look at this. On 29th May 2015, the MSME ministry announced a framework for revival and rehabilitation of MSMEs. Why did it do this? Because every time an MSME defaults, unlike what happens to large corporates, they immediately repossess their factories or their business places, their homes, literally the shirt off their backs. Some that I know have even pledged units of Unit Trust of India when it was there and shares that they hold in order to get. So when they lose everything. This is only for their dream of becoming entrepreneurs. Now, this 2015 framework said that if they begin to default, that banks are supposed to anticipate financial distress, talk to them, set up a committee, and work early enough at hand-holding options to try and help them to restructure, revive, give them time before classifying them as bad loans or non-performing assets. Because once they are classified, then the coercive action starts to possess their homes and their business units. Now, the Reserve Bank of India was given the task of implementing this notification because it's a banking regulator and banks have to listen to it. The National Association of MSME Borrowers says that this directive has been completely ignored for nearly 10 years. We are in 2024. It's a 2015 notification. Lenders not only ignored it, but later argued in court that this was not even binding. You look at the websites of banks, the association has sent us papers, there are discussions on it. You will find a policy on their websites, but the association claims, I mean, it's impossible for us to check out because there are thousands and thousands of entrepreneurs. They say that not a single case has a committee been set up or any hand-holding done. And this seems true because this is what banks have argued in court. They not only argued this in court, but they won a case in the Bombay High Court. Now, pause a moment and contrast this with what happens to our large defaulters. We, as average people, tend to think that corporates get away with default and nothing happens, bankers do nothing. Believe me, it's not correct. It happens only if you owe the bank over 1,000 crore, 5,000 crore, 20,000 crore. Then you discover that the banks have been hand in glove with these promoters, have evergreened their projects, as in give them new loans to cover up old loans. There are no personal guarantees. There is hardly any hypothecation. So in fact, if there is any security at all against the loans, it is not even 1/100th of the loan that is given. So you have examples of people absconding, running away from the country, dumping thousands of crores of bad loans onto banks. You had it with Jatin Mehta, Winsome Diamonds and Suraj Diamonds, Mehul Choksi, well known, you saw the full page ads, Gitanjali Gems, Nirav Modi promoting his own name, Vijay Mallya, the Sandesara group of biotech, which is thriving in Nigeria, but won't pay the 7,000-8,000 crores that they owe to Indian banks. There in India, they're defaulters, doing very well abroad. So like I said, it's tens of thousand crores that you owe. Then you're the king, the banks are chasing you or doing nothing, allowing write-offs. In fact, in scores of cases, after the bankruptcy code, banks have written off as much as 80 to 90% of loans. And we have done several video blogs on this. The latest and the most high-profile one is Anil Ambani. Yes, the Ambani name, but the other Ambani. In fact, Advocate Matthew Nedumpera, who has fought a lot of these MSME cases, says Reliance Communication owed 49,000 crore to 53 banks. But after the bankruptcy process in Bombay, the court allowed it to be settled at, hold your breath, 455 crore, which is 0.92%, which is 0.92% of the total debt. He is still allowed and considered eligible to bid for defense projects in India. Nothing has happened. He still lives in a luxury skyscraper, traveling around the country, dancing at weddings, no action. In fact, in total, Indian banks have just over the last 10 years written off 14.56 lakh crores, mostly on account of very large corporate houses. And none of these people have lost their homes. None of them are poor. On the contrary, they continue to live in luxury, are able to hire the most expensive lawyers to fight their case, and bring down their responsibility as much as they can. Now, contrast this. Manisha Mehta is the president of the National MSME Borrowers Association that I mentioned earlier. She herself is going through litigation on account of coercive action. At a press conference on 25th October, she says that no lender has ever constituted a committee under this 2015 notification to handhold or help smaller companies and smaller borrowers. Instead, lenders exploited their lack of legal knowledge to initiate ruthless recovery action, shamed them through advertisements, which are put out in the papers, calling them defaulters so that it's known to family, friends, schools, and no help is forthcoming. She also points out to this judgment of the Bombay High Court, which several of them filed an appeal in the Supreme Court against. So this Bombay High Court judgment said and confirmed the lender's stand that this 2015 notification was not binding. And why is it not binding? Because India has had a series of these kind of bankruptcy provisions to revive or help or recover from sick companies. So the previous one was the Securitization and Reconstruction of Financial Assets and Enforcement of Securities Act of 2002. It's called the SARFAESI Act. And the court said the provisions of the SARFAESI Act override the MSME Act. Meanwhile, the MSME ministry is watching all this for 10 years. Banks are doing nothing. It says and does nothing. RBI does nothing. They're waiting for this court case. The case is lost. You would expect that after that, at least they would act. No. A bunch of MSMEs goes to the Supreme Court. And finally, there is a glimmer of hope. On 1st August 2024, the Supreme Court issued an order in a clutch of petitions. They usually name the first one, which is Messrs. Pronits versus Canara Bank. Believe me, there were half a dozen other banks. The judgment for the first time finally says this 2015 notification is statutorily binding. In fact, it termed the Bombay High Court's ruling as highly erroneous and said that the 2015 notification has complete statutory force. That is, like I said, a glimmer of hope. But it's cold comfort for MSMEs whose assets have already been seized through coercive action, because the court went on to say that it will not direct the High Court to relook at these matters. So, jo hua so hua, bad luck. It is over. You look at any other remedies that may be available to you in future without going back. Although MSMEs face a distressing future today, may benefit from this judgment after August 1st. Those who fought so hard to bring things to this stage have really limited recourse. And you need to know how bad it is, because there are heart-rending stories that you hear about what happens to entrepreneurs. These are people who are providing employment. They've staked everything to follow their dreams. For instance, there's a case of Radhakishan Danjal. He has a company called Kamal Constructions. He's a high net worth individual who did not hesitate to mortgage his house for cash credit facilities and a bank guarantee. The lender, at the first sign of distress, repossessed his house when he was in hospital and ill. What is worse is that he alleges that his house was worth 10 times his borrowing, and all he can do now is to fight a costly and unequal battle with powerful banks. Then there is Mahesh Kumar, proprietor of MSC Industries. He's written a very touching letter to the Prime Minister on 9th February 2023 after losing his business, and he hasn't got a reply. He and his wife set up a company in 2007 to cater exclusively to Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited at Trichy. All went well till 2017 for 10 years. Then what hit them? The glitches and teething trouble in the implementation of the Goods and Services Act. Not their fault. The Act, if you remember, and you won't if you're not an entrepreneur, people went through hell to get their registration, to get e-way bills. In this case, they were unable to get their GST validated, generate e-way bills for purchase orders. They filed litigation, but that did not work. They appealed to the government to help small entrepreneurs, did not work. Nothing happened. But the problems cascaded. There were delays in paying BHEL. Finally, it led to loan defaults. All this could have been resolved because GST and its registration was a temporary issue. The government launches something. It's a work in progress. You struggle. The government doesn't care. Here's what happens to an individual who set up a business. He was declared a defaulter. The bank refused to restructure his loans, refused to accept a one-time settlement offer of 2.95 crores. Instead, they repossessed his unit, auctioned it, got just 2.92 crore for it. He was willing to pay more. They accepted less. And Mr. Kumar alleges that the actual value of his unit was 12 crores. Bank doesn't care. The system is such that nobody can question the bank. In fact, the bank continues to demand repayment of 6.7 crore. This is what he's alleging. I'm not naming the bank because it's one-sided, but you can see the loss and the distress. He also says that the bank humiliated him by publishing his photos as a defaulter for an entire year, almost every month, so that even his children and their friends and their neighbors knew about it. If he wants to approach the Debt Recovery Tribunal under the bankruptcy rules, he has to pay 50% of the outstanding loan upfront. When he's lost his main asset, which is his factory at a pittance, this is both steep and impractical, isn't it? Now let's come to Manisha Mehta, who is the head of this association. She had a company called Perfect Infra Engineers, again, was running successfully, was listed on the NSE's MSME segment, National Stock Exchange. She had large clients like Lavasa Corporation and Unity Infra projects, which went bankrupt. That's when her problem started, because her clients, large listed companies, huge borrowers, went bankrupt. Their promoters have no problem. Remember, they are fine. Despite repaying 55% of her original loan of 9.5 crore, she says, the bank initiated coercive recovery action. They sold her residential property. They manhandled her to throw her out of her factory, which was forcibly seized. And now she's ended up with multiple litigations filed in different forums. She has even lost some of them because the laws are completely one-sided and against MSME borrowers. This is in complete contrast with large corporations because there's no protection for the small people. They are treated shabbily, they are helpless, recovery measures are harsh, banks do not hesitate to manhandle them. Yet, these are the real job creators. Now, let's go back to the lip service. As recently as earlier this month, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman called for a comprehensive analysis of job creation. She wasn't talking in India, she was speaking at a World Bank event. Maybe her ministry should start by examining how MSME policies and banking practices affect real job creators, because joblessness and unemployment is the single biggest problem in India today. These small enterprises are the real growth engines who create job growth, and they deserve far better support from the government, from banks, and special attention from our finance minister. If you agree, do spread the word, share it so that people know what happens to real entrepreneurs. Thank you.